Before diving in, take a second to do something that actually makes a difference. Hit subscribe and tap the like button so more people who love clever mysteries can find this video. Think of it as joining a secret society of viewers who notice the hidden clues, the tiny details, the patterns in every frame. By subscribing, you are basically telling the algorithm, yes, I want more stories that treat me like a real detective, not a passive spectator. Now let's talk. When you watch a mystery, do you try to solve the case before the detective, pausing the movie in your head to test your own theories? Do you find yourself obsessing over the smallest gestures, the way a character hesitates, the way a camera lingers just a second too long on an object? Imagine that feeling stretched across an entire film where every scene feels like a riddle and every smile might be hiding something. That is the experience promised by Vivo o Morto, a knives-out mystery, the new chapter in the Benoit Blanc saga. A story that tries not a penis to entertain, but to challenge your confidence as a viewer at every step. This time, Benoit Blanc is dropped into a small town that, at primero olar, seems almost too ordinary. A quiet community, a local church, familiar faces that greet each other by name. But this calm surface hides a situation that seems logically impossible. In the middle of a church in front of many witnesses, a priest collapses in a way that no one can fully explain, turning a peaceful setting into the center of a puzzle that feels almost supernatural. It is here that Blanc, the same refined and eccentric detective we know from previous cases, is called in, paired with a young priest, to examine not just what happened, but what everyone believes happened. From the beginning, the film plays with expectations. Instead of isolating all the suspects in a glamorous mansion like in classic mysteries, it uses the town itself as a living puzzle box. Streets, houses, shops, and especially the church form a labyrinth of routes, times, and alibis. The locked room concept is updated into a locked community. If everyone was there, if everything seems visible, how can there still be so much hidden? That is the first psychological hook of the story. It shows a place where everyone thinks they know each other, but the narrative constantly suggests that familiarity might be the greatest illusion of all. Benoit Blanc enters this world as both insider and outsider. He carries the reputation of a legendary detective, yet the town initially sees him as a curiosity, almost a tourist in their tragedy. The script explores this tension. He needs the locals, their stories and impressions, but they also need him to put words to what they cannot articulate. The addition of the young priest as his ally is not just a plot device, it is a thematic mirror. While Blanc questions facts, timelines, and motives, the priest struggles with faith, guilt, and morality, giving the investigation a spiritual layer. Their conversations turn each clue into something bigger than a simple "who did what?" and more like, what does this act reveal about everyone here? The central event in the church becomes a kind of ritual of suspicion. The camera returns to this scene multiple times through different perspectives, each retelling slightly altering what the audience thinks is true. In one version, a character seems worried and compassionate. In another, the same gesture feels calculating or rehearsed. This repetition with variation is a classic Rian Johnson move. The film invites you to build a theory, then immediately cuts your theory's legs out from under you. It is not enough to remember what you saw. You have to question how and why you saw it that way. Around Blanc and the priest, a gallery of townspeople begins to emerge, each carrying their own secrets. There is the police chief who looks competent and in control, but whose past decisions may have shaped the town in ways no one wants to admit. There are powerful local figures whose money and influence built the community, and who now resist any suggestion that corruption or hidden deals might be involved. There are ordinary parishioners whose daily routines intersect with the church and the priest's life, giving them opportunities, motives, and above all, things they desperately do not want brought to light. The film uses each character as a piece of a moral mosaic, individually flawed, collectively dangerous. One of the most interesting aspects of the script is how it uses faith and public image. A priest is not just a man, but a symbol for a town like this. People project expectations and frustrations onto him. Some admire him. Others quietly resent his influence. When something inexplicable happens around such a symbolic figure, the community reacts less like a rational group and more like a body under shock. Rumors spread, Sides are formed, and suddenly it is less about the event itself and more about what each person wants it to mean. The film leans heavily into this psychological chaos, showing how quickly truth becomes secondary to narrative. Blanc, as usual, moves through this fog with a mix of charm and surgical observation. He listens more than he speaks, and when he does speak, it is often to expose a contradiction or a convenient omission. The script constantly frames him against religious imagery, stained glass windows, and symbols of confession, as if his methodical questioning is a modern version of a secular confession booth. The young priest, meanwhile, begins as someone who wants to believe the best about everyone, but slowly confronts the darker undercurrents of the people he serves. Their partnership allows the film to contrast rational deduction with emotional and spiritual turmoil, making even small discoveries feel loaded with meaning. Structurally, the film follows the tradition of the Knives Out franchise. It does not simply build to one final revelation, but constantly shifts the ground under your feet. Just when you think the mystery will follow a predictable route, a clear suspect, a clear motive, it reveals a new layer. Maybe the financial ties between certain townspeople are more complex than anyone admits. Maybe that harmless community event held days before the incident hides a crucial detail. The script uses repetition, callback, and visual clues to reward attentive viewers, making you feel like each scene is a test of how closely you have been paying attention. At the same time, the film does something very modern with the whodunit formula. It is deeply aware of systems and power. The question is not just who is responsible, but who has the power to shape the story of what happened. Some characters are used to being believed automatically. Others, like outsiders or lower status individuals, struggle to have their voices heard. This theme is reinforced whenever Blanc talks with people on the margins of the town's social structure. The more he listens to them, the more the official version of events begins to crumble, revealing a pattern of decisions and silences that prepared the ground for the impossible event in the church. Visually, the church serves as a perfect metaphor for the film's core tension. By day, it is filled with light filtering through colored windows, an open space where everything appears exposed. By night, shadows carve out corners and corridors, transforming the same building into a maze. Several key sequences use this shift from light to shadow to underline how perception works in the story. A scene that seems harmless when remembered in bright daylight takes on a threatening undertone when retold in the dark. The editing and sound design turn footsteps, whispers, and distant sounds into clues that might be important or might be red herrings, constantly stimulating the viewer's paranoia. One recurring idea in the film is the difference between visible guilt and hidden responsibility. Some characters look visibly nervous, defensive, almost as if begging to be suspected. Others remain calm, cooperative, even generous, projecting innocence. The script delights in flipping these expectations. A character who seems too obvious might be hiding something entirely different from what you imagine. Another who looks harmless might be the pivot around which the whole mystery turns. This is an evolution of what Knives Out as a franchise has been doing from the start. Using your genre literacy against you, counting on the fact that you know how these stories usually work, and then twisting that. The relationship between Blanc and the young priest becomes more complex as clues accumulate. What starts as a simple collaboration slowly turns into a moral test for both. Blanc begins to suspect that the priest might know more about certain confessions and private conversations than he is willing or allowed to share. The priest, trapped between religious duty and the need for truth, wrestles with what it means to protect a secret when that secret might shield someone who is manipulating the entire town. The film does not treat this as a simple dilemma. It stretches it across multiple scenes, forcing the character to confront his own fears and past choices. As the investigation deepens, the town's history begins to matter as much as the present. Long-buried conflicts, old financial decisions, quiet scandals, and unresolved grievances all resurface. The script builds the sense that the event in the church is not an isolated act, but the natural outcome of years of denial and compromise. In this way, the movie shifts from a simple puzzle to a critique of how communities build myths about themselves. The good town with a bad day narrative starts to collapse, replaced by something more uncomfortable, the idea that the signs were always there. only no one wanted to look at them too closely. Near the final stretch, the story reaches what seems like a resolution. A dominant theory rises to the surface. The clues appear to line up. The community is ready to accept a neat explanation. This is where Rian Johnson usually pulls his boldest move, and this film is no exception. A small detail, maybe a gesture observed early on or an object seen in the corner of a frame, returns with explosive significance. Blanc, connecting that overlooked piece, dismantles the comfortable version of events and replaces it with a more disturbing truth, one that does not just expose an individual, but the collective willingness to look away whenever power and convenience are at stake. The final reveal does more than name a responsible party. It recontextualizes the entire town. Relationships you thought were genuine suddenly appear transactional. Acts of kindness take on a strategic tone. Public declarations of solidarity start to sound like rehearsed lines in a play crafted to protect reputation and status. That is where the vivo ou morto idea gains symbolic weight. The film suggests that a community can be physically alive, functioning, going to work and church, yet morally numb, emotionally paralyzed, dead in terms of empathy and honesty. It asks whether truth can bring such a place back to life, or if people will simply adapt the truth into yet another comfortable lie. In the closing moments, the dynamic between Blanc and the young priest reaches its quiet climax. The priest has to face what he chose not to say earlier, the moments when fear or loyalty kept him silent. Blanc, who has seen many variations of human weakness, does not deliver a simple lecture. Instead, the film leaves them in a space of uneasy understanding. The case is technically solved, but the emotional cost remains heavy. The town, now forced to live with a new narrative about itself, looks almost unchanged on the surface, yet the viewer cannot unsee what has been revealed. The final images leave an aftertaste of ambiguity. Justice has been served in a formal sense, but has anything truly been healed? That is the hidden brilliance of Vivo ou Morto, a knives-out mystery. It uses the familiar pleasures of a clever whodunit, twists, eccentric detective, colorful suspects, to smuggle in a much harsher reflection about community, faith, and the stories we tell to protect our self-image. It treats the audience with respect, assuming you are attentive enough to catch patterns, brave enough to question characters you like, and patient enough to sit with uncomfortable truths. It is less about a single shocking reveal and more about a slow, methodical dismantling of appearances, until what is left is not just a solution, but a mirror pointed at the viewer. So now the question turns to you. If you lived in that town, surrounded by people you have known all your life, would you be willing to challenge the official story when the clues point somewhere inconvenient? Would you stand with someone like Benoit Blanc and the young priest, risking your comfort to uncover what really happened, or would you cling to the version that keeps everything looking normal? Tell in the comments what you would do and which moment of the movie hit you the hardest. And if you enjoy stories that treat you like a real investigator, do not forget to subscribe, leave your like, and share this video with that friend who always thinks they can solve the mystery before the end.